So if you constantly feel like you're putting on a mask in order to impress other people, or in order to appear a certain way, or in order to hide something about yourself, then what we're going to be getting into today is how to stop doing that, but how to stop doing that in a way which is authentic to you and actually empowers you rather than just makes you feel really vulnerable. Vulnerability in and of itself isn't a problem, but if it makes you feel so vulnerable that it just makes you even more stifled than you were before, then it's not very practical. There's a few different ways that we can go about this, but if you've self-diagnosed the problem that you are putting on a mask, and if you have self-diagnosed, and I actually suggest that you ask maybe some trusted friends or family members, people that you don't just trust, but you trust that they are able to see you from a perspective which is very clean, where there's not much projecting, where there's not much judgment. And then I would suggest that you check with them, does this actually seem like it's right? Because a lot of the time when we self-diagnose, it's an incorrect diagnosis. Because most of the time, if we know the real problem, like I just said, if we know what the actual problem is, then the solution becomes very, very simple. It becomes very easy to see. But a lot of the time, we self-diagnose the incorrect solution based on bits and pieces we picked up upon just living, but also in researching and all that kind of stuff or because we're not applying it in a systemic way, we're not applying it in a way which encourages breadth, depth, and vertical thinking, then it's very easy to get misled, especially when the problem is something which is very convoluted or is something that we're very sensitive to. It just makes things much, much harder to see. So first of all, fact check yourself. But if you are putting on a mask, the first thing you have to realize is what made you start to put on this mask. That's the first part. So the what, then it's the how you're putting on this mask. And now that you know the what and the how, so what made you, the how you came to put on this mask, the third pillar is looking at how you're sustaining this mask. So, okay, I know what the what is and I know what the how is now. Is that enough? Maybe if you check back in, the mask has already been let go, right? If you see things really with true wisdom and true understanding, a lot of the time the problems just go away. But if that's not the case, which in issues which are more sticky, it's all good if that's happening for you. With issues that are more sticky, we need to look at the third pillar, which is how are we sustaining this belief? How are we sustaining this mask? And that is usually going to tell you, well, I can understand the what and the how, but there's still something inside of me which is functioning, which is holding on to this mask, usually because there's some benefit that's being given. Now, I have a free shadow work product, the most practical guide to shadow work on the internet. It's free, download it. It's the most comprehensive view of shadow that you can get for free that I've seen anywhere. It gives the full system and a full step-by-step breakdown of how to do shadow work on yourself. If you download that and if you apply the homework, then I promise it's going to absolutely revolutionize how you do internal work and change your life. That's going to get into the breadth of work you can do, the depth of work you can do, and the height of perspective is also built into it. So you get a systemic way, an ecosystem of shadow work that you can do to yourself so you don't get pulled into all of the blind spots which I just talked about. That's the first thing I would recommend. The second thing that I would recommend is once you have these three different characteristics of what's causing you to put on the mask, then you can bring up what I would call a little bit of a vulnerability framework or a little bit of a vulnerability guide. Now, what is that? It means with who am I completely trusting of? Now, for some of you, this might not be too many people. It might just be one or two. It might not be anybody. That's okay. But who can I identify in my life that I feel that no matter who I am, no matter how I show up, no matter what kind of mask that I am having, or I'm wearing, or I feel like I have to wear, who can I trust the most? This is like your tier 1 people. Then you have your tier 2 people. Who are people that I feel like I can trust, but I don't fully trust them? These are your tier 2 people. Then you have tier 3 people, people who are just, I'm kind of lukewarm, neutral to, and then you have tier 4 people, which are people who I don't trust. Now, with the mask, you practice taking it off with the tier 1, but your area for growth is the tier 2 people. Tier 2 people is kind of like, I feel like I should trust them fully, but I just either don't have the experience, so there's an innocent issue, or I feel for whatever reason I have my own projections and conclusions that this person is someone that I can't be vulnerable with. That's your growth opportunity. And then tier 3 and tier 4, we just wait. Because over time, now this is what happened to a client, he had an issue putting on a mask of trying to appear tough or trying to appear attractive, trying to appear successful. Now, he was already all three of these things, but the pain was not the fact that he wasn't these things, but the fact that he felt like he was always having to do a performance, that he could never let his guard down, that he could never relax. The pain that this caused him is pretty obvious. It's the fact that he never really felt like he could connect or be himself around somebody. So when we worked on this, first of all, we got rid of the shadow work, which is why I recommend go and download that free shadow work. Once we dealt with the shadows, which enabled him to actually look at this problem and then feel comfortable in it and have a bit more equanimity and heal what was causing that, then we were able to put in this vulnerability system where he would then practice and actually have a real practical framework to go out and practice this, where he would be masterless around his tier 1 people and then push into tier 2 friends. And then when he was around people who were in the tier 2, he realized that they were just his own projections and his own judgment. And that when he led with vulnerability, which is also seen as strength if you do it in the right way, which is the right way, because you're putting yourself out there, that's a strength of character, that's a strong character trait to be able to do that, right? It's the leap of faith. It's one of the big parts of the hero's journey. When he was able to do that, then his friends not only supported him, but they reciprocated to him. And now he was able to step into being a leader in that dynamic. Doesn't mean that you should always be a leader with your friends. It's not alpha beta, it's not leader follower, but it meant that there was that kind of energy that he was now able to step into. And his friends felt safe because he led by example, led with vulnerability, led with strength, and then they were able to be vulnerable right back to him. And this means that now he's able to actually connect on a much deeper level with people that he cares about. And then when that becomes really comfortable with you, what you start to realize, you kind of get this like momentum building behind you. You start to realize that even if somebody doesn't reciprocate it, you don't need this other person to reciprocate it, because if you're doing your shadow work, you don't have any insecurities. So you still have insecurities, but you will not have insecurities around this because you've solved the problem. Because you don't have insecurities around this, you become much more grounded, much more loving, much more confident, much less reactive, much more at peace with yourself. So you don't need this other person's approval, which automatically makes you drop the mask without you even having to push into tier 3. But if that doesn't happen by its own, then you can start pushing into tier 3, and you can start to realize that yes, some people might reciprocate and some people doesn't, but it doesn't actually matter. It doesn't actually affect me in the way that I thought it would. In fact, it doesn't affect me in the way I thought it would, in such a way that I would much rather just be myself and not put on the mask and deal with maybe somebody getting pissed off or somebody getting more abrasive or somebody leaving my life, because me just being myself is an absolute non-negotiable. Because the moment I feel like I have to perform or I have to put on a mask, that's when I feel like I'm not being myself, I'm not being genuine, I'm not being authentic, and I can't actually live the life that I want to live. You start to realize that happens on its own. But you need those two things. You need the shadow work. Like I said, link is in the description and it's in the comment. Go and download that guide. It will change your life. And then the second part is we have this vulnerability system, which is just it took me a long time to come up with, but right now it's very simple to understand. Tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. I got it from kind of the red, yellow, green system, where there's areas which you feel really confident in, there's areas which you feel which are growth opportunities, which is the orange, and then there's the red, which is no-go zones. So tier 4 would be red, which means that before you're ready, don't go for it. But tier 4 is actually a tier in and of itself. You might not ever really want to open up to them. It doesn't mean that you play a mask, or it doesn't mean that you're in a mask, but it also doesn't mean that you just open up to them. That's something where these people might actually not have my best intentions at heart. Or if they do, they're so caught up in their own world that they will just cause harm to me being around them. It's all good. There's no maliciousness. You can still hold them in compassion, with wisdom and with love. But these are people that you typically would not want to go into. Whereas tier 2, tier 3, people are in the orange part where you would want to push into and you can expose yourself and there's not any danger happening with them. But there you go. There's a quick vulnerability system. There's a reminder to do your shadow work and enjoy.